Welcome to Jalen News Stories. If you like the stories you hear, hit the like button and subscribe and tell your friends about this channel. Now, let's get to the stories. Today's short story is Luck by Mark Twain. Mark Twain was born on November 30th, 1835, in a small town off the Mississippi. He is known for his novels The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. He died on April 21st, 1910. Now let's get started. Luck by Mark Twain. Note, this is not a fancy sketch. I got it from clergyman from who was an instructor at Woolwich 40 years ago and who vouched for its truth. M.T. There was a banquet in London in honor of one of the two or three conspicuous illustrious English military names of this generation. For reasons which will presently appear, I will withhold his name and titles and call him Lieutenant General Lord Arthur Scoresby, V.C., K.C.B., etc., etc., etc. Was a fascination there is a renowned name. There sat the man in actual flesh, whom I heard so many thousands of times since that day, 30 years before. There he is, when his name shot suddenly to the zenith of the Crimean battlefield to remain forever celebrated. It was food and drink to me to look and look and look at that demigod, scanning, searching, noting the quietness, the reserve, the noble gravity of his countenance, the simple honesty that expressed itself all over him, the sweet unconscious of his greatness, unconsciousness of the hundreds of admiring eyes fastened upon him, unconsciousness of the deep, loving, sincere worship welling out of the breasts of those people and flowing toward him. The clergyman at my left was an old acquaintance of mine, clergyman now, but had spent the first half of his life in the camp and field, and as an instructor at the military school Woolwich, just at the moment have been talking about, I veiled a singular light glimmering in his eyes, and he leaned down and muttered confidentially to me, indicating the hero of the banquet with a gesture. Privately, he's an absolute fool. The verdict was a great surprise to me. If the subject had been Napoleon or Socrates or Solomon, my astonishment could not have been greater. Two things I was well aware: that the Reverend was a man of strict ferocity, and that his judgment of men was good. Therefore I knew, beyond doubt or question, that the world that was mistaken about this hero. He was a fool. So I meant to find out, at a convenient moment, how the Reverend, all solitary and alone, had discovered this secret. Some days later the opportunity came, and this is what the Reverend told me. About 40 years ago, I was an instructor at the Military Academy of Woolwich. I was present when of the sections when young Scoresby underwent his preliminary examination. I was touched to quick with pity, for the rest of the class answered up brightly and handsomely, while why dear me, he didn't know anything as to, so to speak. He said evidently good and sweet and lovable and guileless, and so it was exceedingly painful to see him stand there as a serene, as a graven image, and deliver himself of answers which were veritable miracles for stupidity and ignorance. All that passion in me that aroused in his behalf, I said to myself, when comes to me examined again, he will be flung over, of course. So it will be simply a harmless act of charity to ease his fall as much as I can. I took him aside and found that he knew a little of Caesar's history. And as he didn't know anything else, I went to work and drilled him like a galley slave on a certain line of stock questions concerning Caesar, which I knew would be used. If you believe me, he went through it with flying colors an examination day. He went through on the purely superficial cram and got compliments too, while others who knew 1,000 times more than he got plucked. by some strangely luck accident, an accident not likely to happen twice in a century. He was asked no questions outside of the narrow limits of his drill. It was stupefying. Well, all through this course, I stood by him with something of the sentiment with mother, with a mother feels for a crippled child, and he always saved himself by a miracle, apparently. Now, of course, the thing that would expose him and kill him at last was mathematics. I resolved to make his death as easy as I could. So I drilled him and crammed him and crammed him and drilled him, just on the line of questions which the examiners would be most likely to use, and then launching him on his fate. Well, sir, try to conceive of the results to my consternation. He took the first prize, and with it he got a perfect ovation in the way of compliments. Sleep! There was no more sleep for me for a week. My conscience tortured me day and night. What I had done purely through charity, and only to ease the poor youth's fall. I never had dreamed of any such preposterous results as the thing that had happened. I felt as guilty and miserable as the creator of Frankenstein. Here was a wooden head whom I had put in the way of glittering promotions and prodigious responsibilities. And but one thing could happen. He and his responsibilities would all go to ruin together at the first opportunity. The Crimean War had just broken out. Of course there had to be a war, I said to myself. He couldn't have peace and give this donkey a chance to die before he is found out. I waited for the earthquake. It came, and it made me reel when it did come. He was actually gazetted to a captaincy in a marching regiment. Their men grew old and gray in the service before the climb of sublimity like that. And who could ever have foreseen that they would go on to such a load of responsibility on such green and inadequate shoulders? I could just barely have stood if they had made him a cornet. But a captain? Think of it. I thought my hair would turn white. Consider what I did. I, I who so loved repose and inaction. I said to myself, I am responsible to this country for this, and I must go along with him and protect the country against him as far as I can. So I took my poor little capital, and I had saved up through years of work and grinding economy, and went with a sigh and bought a cornetcy in his regiment. And again we went to the field. And there, oh dear, it was awful. Blunders. Why, he never did anything but blunder. But you see, nobody was in this fellow's secret. Everybody had him focused wrong and necessarily misinterpreted his performance every time. Consequently, they took his idiotic blunders for inspiration of genius. They did, honestly. His mildest blunders were enough to make a man in his right mind cry. But they did make me cry and rave too privately. And the thing that kept me always in a sweet of apprehension was the fact that every fresh blunder he made increased the luster of his reputation. I kept saying to myself, he'll get so high that when discovery does finally come, it will be like the sun falling from the sky. Went right along up, from grade to grade, over the dead bodies of his superiors, until at last, in the hottest moment of the battle down went our colonel, and my heart jumped into my mouth, for Scoresby was next in rank. Now for it, said I, we'll all land in Shell in 10 minutes, sure. The battle was awful hot. The Allies were steadily giving way all over the field. Our regiment occupied a position that was vital. A blunder now must be destruction. At this crucial moment, what does that immortal fool do but detach the regiment from a place and order a charge over the neighboring hill, where there wasn't a suggestion of an enemy. There you go, I said to myself. This is the end at last. And away we did go, and were over the shoulder of the hill before the insane moment could be discovered and stopped. And what did we find? An entire and unsuspected Russian army in reserve. And what happened? We were eaten up. That is necessarily what would have happened in 99 cases out of 100. But no. Those Russians argued that no single regiment would come browsing around there at such a time. It must be the entire English army. And that the sly Russian game was detected and blocked. So they turned tail, and away they went, pell-mell, over the hill and down into the field in wild confusion. And we after them. They themselves broke the solid Russian center in the field and tore through, and in no time there was most tremendous rout you ever saw. And the defeat of the Allies was turned into a sweeping and splendid victory. Marshal Canrobert looked on, dizzy with astonishment, admiration, and delight, and sent right off to Scoresby and hugged him and decorated him on the field in presence of all armies. And what was Scoresby's blunder at the time? Merely the mistaking his right hand for his left. That was all. An order had come to him to fall back and support our right, and instead he fell forward and went over the hill to the left. But the name he won that day as a marvelous military genius filled the world with his glory, and the glory will never fade while history books last. It's just good and sweet and lovable and unpretending as a man can be, but he doesn't know enough to come in when it rains. Now that is absolutely true. He is the supremest ass in the universe. And until half an hour ago, nobody knew it but himself and me. He has been pursued day by day and year by year by a most phenomenal and astonishing luckiness. He has been a shining soldier in all wars for a generation. He was littered in his whole military life with blunders, and yet has never committed one that didn't make him a knight or a baronet or a lord or something. Look at his breast. Why, he is just clothed and domesticated with foreign decoration. Well, sir, every one of them is the record of some shouting stupidity or other, and taken together, they are proof that the very best thing in this world that can befall a man is to be born lucky. I say again, as I said at the banquet, Scoresby's an absolute fool. The end. Thank you for watching. If you have a story that you would like to be read on this channel, please send it to j.lanou.stories@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.